We are live on Facebook. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Nonprofit Culture of Success Experts Edition. And David is going to unlock a cultural toolkit that will help you make your organization more effective in every way, every sense of the word. A culture toolkit. And culture is a word we use a lot in business, and it really describes how we work, how we operate, how we collaborate as a group. David, why don't you unpack that? First of all, tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, thanks, Russell, for having me on your show today. It's a joy to be with you. I always enjoy the time that we spend together. And my background is a very peculiar one in a way, in the sense that I'm a psychologist. My doctorate's in clinical psychology and organizational development psychology. And I've also been an entrepreneur since 1980, and I have a very extensive background in leadership and culture architecture, which I've occupied roles with leadership and culture development really literally since the 1970s. My books have won a cumulative total of 8 book awards. I've been featured in 23 different books, and I have also won a leadership award and a culture creation award. So my experience is really a blend of being in the trenches as a leader and a culture developer, as well as being a psychologist. So that's a very odd kind of combination for me to bring. And frankly, the thing that most excites me, Russell, is that there's a lot of stuff out there on leader development and culture development and employee engagement and volunteer engagement and things like that. But it's largely inspirational, motivational mindset. It's about what we ought to be doing. And where my passion lives and where my focus lives is on converting good intentions into step-by-step sequenced procedures that enable nonprofits and for-profits and causes and agencies to actually walk their talk.
You know, culture really is all about how people treat one another, and it's an atmospheric type of thing. You have an effective culture, you have a good culture, you have a productive culture, you have a culture that has people honor one another, you have a culture that has integrity. There are a lot of ingredients that go into culture, but it really boils down to how we deal with one another, and as a result of how we deal with one another under one roof, we're able to deal with people who come into contact with us. There's a lot of disengagement in workplaces everywhere. People just don't feel valued. There's a lot of acrimony, adversarial relationships, and when you're pulling together as a team in a nonprofit organization, that's really something you can ill afford because people are counting on you. So talk a little bit about how people can come together and what is it actually to have people have a system to come together to be more effective. Unpack that for us a little bit and tell us what that's about.
Sure. Well, what we hope, of course, is that people come together with a shared mission, a shared vision first, and then a shared mission in terms of how that vision is going to get actualized, and with clarity about each person's roles in helping to actualize that mission, and with ground rules, or if maybe we don't have to use such a rigid word, but with ways of operating together that make sure that the way that we collaborate with our respective roles actually collectively produces the results that we're passionate about producing. And that kind of ties into the question of what the devil is culture in the first place. Like, how do you how do you define culture? So maybe that's a place to start, is defining culture. Does that make sense?
That does. That makes a lot of sense because the word is used, and there's so many things that define a culture. There's so many aspects to culture when it comes to now to an organization. There's a culture of innovation where you try new things and people are encouraged to try new things. There's a culture of fundraising where people are plugged into going out and getting the resources that the organization needs and talk about things in terms of value. There's a culture of integrity where people can have tough conversations without making things personal to work better together. And that's a little bit of what you do, or quite a bit of what you do. So tell us a little bit about how, if you're in the workplace, how do you make it safe for people to go out on a limb and try new things? How do you make it safe to have tough conversations? How do you make it safe to talk about money, which is a big elephant in the room? How do you make it safe to talk about failure? Because, you know, everything doesn't go as planned. How do you create a place, a safe space for people to just try to do things in a better way without worrying about failure or having these things personalized?
Yes. Well, you know, the word that you are using, you're coming back to over and over, is safety. And safety is hopefully one of the features, one of the qualities of an organizational or enterprise culture. The way I define culture, first of all, before I get back to how do you create safety, is my definition of culture is an organization's way of thinking, behaving, and working. And inside of that, we do have the question of safety. So safety is this delicious interplay between the magic of innovation, the magic of transformation and change, and brainstorming, and coming up with really cool new ways of proceeding on the one hand, counterbalanced with the wisdom and the blessings of stability, predictability, and organization. When you have high amounts of stability, predictability, and organization, and low amounts of innovation, what you have is a culture that is a rules-oriented, status quo, creativity stifling culture. When you, in the opposite, have a culture where there's a huge, wonderful, magical emphasis on creativity and innovation, and very little in the way of organization, predictability, and standards, you have chaos. So part of what has to get translated from good intentions into actions is this really delicious integration that's a both and integration between transformation, innovation, and creativity, and stability, predictability, and standards. So that's something that every organization has to pay attention to. If they see too much chaos, there's not enough stability, predictability, organization, and standards. If they see rules and status quo addiction and very little in the way of stability, if they see the opposite, then what they're having is chaos. So they have to go back and forth between, do we have too much chaos to serve our mission, or do we have too much status quo addiction to serve our mission? So that's one piece. The other piece, Russell, is this equally important integration between doingness and beingness. This integration between get stuff done, and loving on each other. And there's another way of saying that piece, or speaking to that integration, that is languaged from the research that was done decades ago by the Harvard Negotiation Project, where they were looking really at the problem-solving process and the process of essentially culture development around the question of what kind of leadership style creates the greatest amount of engagement and productivity and goodwill and good atmosphere, good culture. And what they found was that leaders who were strong on tasks and strong on people were the ones that got the most out of their people. What does it mean to be strong on tasks, or what they called hard on tasks, and soft on people? That was their actual terminology, is that you are holding a very high standard around accountability, meaning that what I say I'm going to do is actually what I'm going to do, while having a tender-hearted attitude toward the people who are in your culture. So tender-hearted doesn't mean letting people off the hook when they're not accountable. It means not shaming them. It means holding their feet to the fire without shame. And that's what being hard on tasks and soft on people means. And that is all about get her done, be the warrior, get stuff done, and love on people while that stuff is getting done. When you've got delicious integration between get her done and love on people and getting things done, and integration between the magic of innovation, creativity, and transformation counterbalanced by the equally important magic of having standards and predictability and organization, you've got a high performance culture. You have a culture that I refer to actually as a high CHIP culture, where CHIP is an acronym, where the C in CHIP stands for collaboration, the H is happiness, the I is integrity, and the P is productivity. So what I'm outlining in terms of intention and framework is a high CHIP, thriving success culture.
And that's a lot. You just unpacked a great deal, but it's a hard balance to meet, you know. My friend Adam Markell talks about having warriors and wizards. They have a program for each. You have warriors, this is the push through where you get that productivity. The wizards are the people who can make it all come together. So that's really important. You got to have both. And it's, you know, a lot of times an organization may say, we've got some things that are wrong. There's some unspoken things. How frequently do you find yourself walking into a situation where people know that there are a lot of things wrong, and maybe they're having a hard time having these conversations, and you probably walked in the middle of this. So how do you, when you walk into a situation like that, help them assess and understand where they may be culturally, and communicate to them, okay, these are some things that we can do that will foster more effectiveness in a way that doesn't alienate everybody?
Yes, great question, Russell. So let me answer that in a moment. But first, let me just add something to the warriors and wizards, because I love Adam Markell, and I love his way of distilling down to bare bones what really matters. The add-on that I would offer is you don't only need warriors and wizards in order for an enterprise, whether it's a for-profit or a nonprofit or cause or agency, to work well, but the warriors and the wizards have to be in love with each other. They cannot be at war with each other. There can't be this pecking order or hierarchy that says wizardry is more wonderful and more important and more precious and more sacred than warriorness, or being a warrior is more important than wizardry. They have to be in love with each other. And that then ties into your question, which is, you asked, how often do I walk into a situation with an enterprise where they've called me in because they want to elevate their culture, and there are all kinds of withholds going on. There's unfinished business, there's resentment, there's residue. How often? Well, basically 100% of the time. Basically 100% of the time. Now, what varies from enterprise to enterprise is how contaminated by that is the enterprise. Is it a little bit, a moderate amount, or a significant amount? But yes, all of the time, to one degree or another. Why is that? Well, it's very simple, actually. Well-intentioned people don't necessarily come to us, into our enterprise with the culture creation, participation, and accountability skills that are needed in order to consistently participate in effective ways in a high chip culture, in a high collaboration, happiness, integrity, and productivity culture. And we, as the leaders, as the founders of a nonprofit, or the CEO of a company, or the developer of a new entrepreneurial enterprise, we can either moan and complain about the fact that these well-intentioned people don't come to us with those skills, or we can take responsibility for doing something about it. And that's really where I come in, because there are lots of companies, thank goodness, there are lots and lots of entities that really do believe authentically in integrity and collaboration and accountability. As we know, Russell, you and I know, there are unfortunately too many enterprises that don't hold those values. But I don't deal with those enterprises. They're not my people. They're not my clients. They're not my customers. I don't mentor them. Fortunately, there are really a lot that really authentically believe in these kinds of values around integrity and collaboration and accountability and things like that. And it's those that are struggling and in the most pain, because they're not calling into question their good intentions. They're not usually even calling into question the good intentions of the people that they've selected into their culture. They're struggling because they don't know how to translate those good intentions into step-by-step practical skills. Even Google didn't know how to do that. I don't know if I should do a side trip into Google before answering your question, but they did a study on this very thing. Maybe I should just answer your question first. Should I do that?
Yeah, that would be a good example of the principle you're talking about too, going into the story about Google.
Oh, well, should I do that first then before I answer the question you asked?
Yeah, well, yes, because that'll be a good illustration.
Okay, all right. So here's what the deal was with Google. Google executives believed that building the best teams meant compiling the best people, but they weren't sure that they were right. So they did some research and formed a project that they called Project Aristotle. And in Project Aristotle, they interviewed or they dealt with 180 Google teams, conducted over 200 interviews, and analyzed over 250 team attributes that emerged as a result of those 200 plus interviews with 180 teams. And what they found as a result of that analysis in Project Aristotle was really captured very well by Google's director of people analytics. And what he said was, we were dead wrong. Who is on a team matters less than how the team members interact, structure their work, and view their contributions. And what Project Aristotle found that caused him to make that statement was that it was group norms that govern success. What are group norms? Unspoken or openly acknowledged traditions, behavioral standards, and unwritten rules that govern how a team functions, often profoundly govern that. And what Project Aristotle found was essentially a 5-ingredient dream team algorithm for high functioning cultures. The first was meaning, that what they're working on is personally important for each of them. The second was impact, that they fundamentally believe that the work they're doing matters. The third was structure and clarity, that their team's goals, roles, and execution plans were well defined. The fourth is the one that you emphasized a couple of minutes ago, Russell, which is psychological safety. We take risks on our team without feeling insecure or embarrassed. And the fifth was dependability, that they could count on each other to do high quality work on time. And they found, Google found in Project Aristotle, that personnel that had these 5 traits were less likely to leave, more likely to turn diversity into an advantage. And I don't simply mean cultural diversity, I mean temperament diversity, like wizards versus warriors, into an advantage, and were more successful. If you, by the way, if your readers want to learn more about the Project Aristotle findings, I have a quick link that can get them there. They can go to drgruder.com/Google, and that will forward them directly into the Project Aristotle findings. It's drgruder.com/Google is the forwarder into Project Aristotle.
Awesome, awesome. And there's a lot there. And so that's it. It's that right mixture. Everybody's not exactly the same, but what makes a high performance organization high performance is that you've got all the skills and all of the attributes across the board, whether you got all of those in house or you do it through collaboration so that everybody's working at their peak, everybody's working at their strength, and you're moving forward. You're not focusing on gaps or weaknesses. It just gives you more opportunities to collaborate. So building this culture and doing the types of things that Google learned about, going in and working with that and working with systems, it takes a little bit of enlightenment on the part of an organization to even know that they need these types of things. But you've got a process, and it's not quite a 12-step thing, but 9 steps is better than 1 or 2, because I don't think you can get by on 1 or 2 step, and unless you like, you like to dance in a country western bar, you might be able to 2-step at night. But 2-stepping to create a culture, there's so many moving parts to that, and you systematize that. How did you do it?
Well, yeah, and we will get into the systemization in a moment, but how did I do that was through trial and error over decades. Like I said, I started filling leadership roles in organizations and doing culture architecture, culture creation, literally starting in the 1970s. So I've been at this for a long time. And because my passion is about turning good intentions into step-by-step procedures, my glorious failures and my glorious successes have gradually carved or sculpted very high precision clarity about the step-by-step procedures and ingredients that enable cultures to become high chip cultures, thriving success cultures that are high collaboration, high happiness, high integrity, and high productivity. And so it's from in the trenches, both first as a leader and a culture creator, and then subsequently in more recent decades as a person that's brought into other organizations to help them elevate their culture and their leadership quality and their engagement levels. Probably our next step is to really start talking about what those procedures are.
Yes, and so this is new. I've been exposed to some of your work at CEO Space because we build high performance teams there, and we build teams when business owners come in. They're looking for teams, and we build a lot of teams. And there's been a lot of work that you've done maintaining the integrity of the organization and creating a customer experience that's unlike many others. And a big piece of that was integrity, and I've seen that piece of it. So is that the initial piece? I know that it's woven throughout there. So where does that fit in with all of the other offerings that we've actually witnessed and experienced? And I've seen some pieces of it. So how did you roll all of that out? Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, integrity ties everything together because we can't have collaboration without integrity, and we can't really be in integrity unless we're highly collaborative. And so at the foundation of integrity is the word integration.
Okay.
It really means alignment. It means that all of our component pieces are working together. They're in synergy. They're in alignment with each other. So our intentions and our actions reflect each other. They're aligned. That's integrity. Our ability to be accountable for the commitments we make is integrity in action. The way in which we take responsibility for our unintended parts in implementation breakdowns that inevitably occur sooner or later is about integrity. A low integrity situation is where we have great intentions and our implementation stinks. Our implementation does not help us actualize our intentions. In fact, our implementation is undermining our intentions. Low integrity is where I make a commitment and I don't follow through on it. And worse than not following through on it, when I don't follow through, I make all kinds of excuses and blame other situations and people and circumstances for why I didn't follow through. Low integrity is where we have a breakdown, we have an implementation breakdown or a conflict, and what we're doing is pointing the finger at each other and telling the other people involved how they screwed up instead of telling them how we screwed up without shaming ourselves. Just simply, here's my unintended role, here's the unintended negative impact that my unintended role had, and here's what I'm going to do to repair that negative impact to the extent that I am capable of repairing it because it's water under the bridge. And most importantly, here's what I'm committed to doing to handle future similar situations more effectively than I knew how to do this last time around. That actually is one of the 9 procedures of high integrity culture creation, of high chip culture creation that creates high collaboration, happiness, integrity, and productivity.
And this is one of 9, ladies and gentlemen. It's one of 9. So I've been involved with CEO Space International for 5 years. And as a person that went in with a volunteer staff, a lot of organizations have leaders, they have followers. Picture yourself in a room with a team of 15 other people. You all own your own companies, and you have to be melded into a team that serves 500 people. And everything has to be done with precision to see to it that the experience for everybody that shows up is absolutely seamless. And you walk into this room with your team, you've never seen, you may know 2 or 3 out of the other 15, but you've never seen each other, you've never spent 10 minutes in a room with each other. There you are, and you're expected to become a cohesive, high-performance team, and you've got 7 days to do it. So you walk in, you have your start, and you've got 7 days to do this and make it seamless. And we were able to do that using this integrity system that David just talked about. This is one piece out of 9. So now, and it works with a bunch of CEOs, type A people who are used to leading. They become not just leaders, but followers. Everybody's given that opportunity to lead, which is what high performance organizations do. So that aside, let's get into the other 8 pieces, because I thought that one piece, I've seen the power of that one piece, but it's integrated into a whole system. Tell me about the rest of it. This is awesome.
That's thank you. That's right. A couple of things before I do that I really want to underline and emphasize in what you said. One of the things is that you said there are leaders and there are followers, which is true. There's a third group that's overlooked, and that's the group that I am part of. There are the leaders and there are the followers, and there are the midwives. The midwives are the facilitators, the trainers, the mentors, the people who are brought in to help leaders become high performance leaders and followers become high performance teammates. And the other thing that I want to emphasize in what you were saying is that, yes, these teams of largely strangers have a week to come together into becoming a high performance team, but in truth, they have a lot less time than that, because the event, the efficiency, the seamlessness, the high professional quality of event production for these CEO space events needs to be high quality from the very beginning. So these teams you were talking about at CEO Space, Russell, as you already know, they need to become the beginnings of a very high performance team within the first 24 to 48 hours. And if they're not using very, very high efficiency procedures for becoming a high performance team, the learning curve is too steep and the time it takes is too long to do them any good. And so you're right, the things that I teach them are very learnable in very short periods of time and very usable almost immediately. Now, I say usable, I'm not talking about mastery, because mastery, of course, develops over time and practice, but at least usable. And let me start actually with the 3 of those 9 procedures that I do teach the team, the staff at CEO Space in very short periods of time. The first is that I go through the process, the procedure of creating accountability capable commitments. And the reason that I go through that is because, unfortunately, out there in society, most people, and in most businesses, therefore, and nonprofits, most people confuse good intention with a commitment. And a commitment isn't a commitment unless it's accountability capable, unless I can hold myself accountable for that commitment. So if I say I'm going to be on staff, I'm going to be on CEO Space Forum staff, that's a good intention. If I say I will show up at least 3 minutes before every single staff meeting and at least a half hour before every single presentation that I am on the staff for during that week, then I have accountability capable commitments, because an independent witness, a fly on the wall, would be able to say, yes, they were there at that time or earlier, or no, they weren't. That's not a good intention anymore. That's an example of an accountability capable commitment. So that's one of the 3 procedures that I teach the forum staff in a very short period of time, is how to tell the difference between a good intention and an accountability capable commitment, so that what the commitments the staff is making to each other are accountability capable, not simply good intentions. So that's number 1. Number 2, what I teach the staff is a procedure for elevating best practices. What are best practices? They're our optimal ways of functioning with each other, of collaborating with each other on behalf of our mission, on behalf of our purpose, on behalf of our deliverables, our objectives, our goals. And best practices also have very important elements, ingredients to them, because essentially what we're looking at when we're doing best practices upgrades is we're looking at what's working well and why that matters, what positive impact does what's working well have, so that when we know the positive impact, it increases our motivation to do more of what's working well. And then the other part of best practices upgrades is about looking at what our even better ifs are. In other words, what we could be even better at than we already are. Now, why do I word it that way? Why do we talk about even better ifs? For a very important reason. It has nothing to do with political correctness, which I'm frankly not a fan of. I'm a fan of tenderness beneath our honesty, not political correctness. I, in fact, view political correctness as an attempt to enforce morality or integrity. You can't enforce that. You can empower people with the skills that enable them to walk their talk, so that you don't even need political correctness. So the even better if framing is the inoculation. It's the immunity shot. It's the immunization against deteriorating into piss and moan and gripe sessions, which too many organizations, even populated by authentically well-intended people, too often deteriorate into when they're talking about what's not working well. So instead of focusing on what's not working well, what's wrong, what's bad, what's screwing us up, we focus instead on what the even better ifs would be. We don't spend endless time dismantling and doing autopsies on what's screwed up. We don't pretend like things aren't screwed up. If there's something that's screwed up, we acknowledge that. But we acknowledge it for the purpose of looking at how could we do that better, not who's screwing up and why they're a bad person and how they have to straighten up and fly right in order for the rest of us to be okay. Those are signs of a dysfunctional culture, actually. We instead look at brainstorming what could be even better than what we're doing, and the difference that particular even better if that we're considering could make, and why making that difference matters, so that we can weigh different even better if possibilities in order for us to come to clarity about which of the even better ifs is our best even better if for up-leveling that particular best practice. And then someone records what that is. They write down, they memorialize is the technical term, that particular best practice upgrade, that particular even better if, which becomes the new standard that we hold each other accountable to from then forward. So that's the second thing that I teach in a short period of time. And then the third thing I already touched on, which is implementation breakdown repair. What's the procedure for repairing breakdowns that happen when we're implementing our good intentions, when we're implementing our accountability capable agreements and our best practices? So how do we turn those breakdowns into opportunities that actually elevate our collaboration and productivity, rather than turning those breakdowns into wars and battles and accusations that destroy cultures? So that's the third piece. And I already outlined what the ingredients of implementation breakdown repair procedures are. So those are the first 3 of the 9.
Those are phenomenal. And so we started doing that probably 5 years ago, I think was the first time that I actually was exposed to that. And I hadn't seen anything like that before. And when when you're there together, you're there for service. And this is the thing that being a volunteer staff member with CEO Space International is about. This is the thing that nonprofits are about. We're here to serve, love, and serve other people. And we go in with the best of intentions. And sometimes things break down. But this is a process. I think we spent maybe 90 minutes unpacking the whole thing so that we were able to put it into practice. And as a staff group, we went through 3 phases. We call it storming, norming, and then forming. And at the forming stage, you're at high performance. This is stuff that if you make that commitment, and when you're working on a cause with a group of people, you're committed. This stuff is not easy. As nonprofit leaders, what you're doing, so the commitment, there's no doubt that you're committed. But these things are things you can learn in a very short period of time. And I've seen this, we've gone everywhere. I would say that I've done this probably 8 to 10 times now as a volunteer staff member. We've gone from as little as 12 hours to taking up to maybe 40 hours before we were forming. And it just really depended on the mix. And every once in a while, you would have one person or two to just, struggle with it. And they understood it at the end of it because there's no judgment. We sit, we talk to one another, and we talk, so it was an experience they were not used to. And, we don't shoot or wound it. Sometimes they struggle, but they came back. And they've been effective. And so we all learn and we all grow. And so those are just the first 3 pieces. Those could be learned quickly, what it entails. It takes practice. But it's something that can happen without huge amounts of time. You can actually accomplish something in a short period of time, and in that process to get you moving in a good direction. So that's only 1/3 of the tool. So I'm going to stop talking because David, you need to tell us about the other pieces, how they fit together, and how people move through this whole entire system, and maybe give them an idea what sort of time and effort they can look at investing, and how quickly they'll see results with it.
Sure. So all of these procedures are designed to create rapid results through easily learnable, step-by-step, here's how you do it kinds of training. The thing that I want to amplify before I go on in what you were saying is, yes, absolutely, it requires practice. Learning every one of these procedures I've designed is in fact easily, quickly learned. Practice is what always translates learning into proficiency. That the additional piece that's always important is a safety net. The safety net is, as you're practicing as individuals and as teams, who do you go to when your practice gets bogged down? So at CEO Space, when the staff gets bogged down, when there's somebody that's having trouble getting it, or when the need for breakdown repair exceeds the level of training that can be provided in just a short period of time that we're limited to in the context of that kind of staffing experience, there needs to be that safety net, that person that the leaders and the team can go to consult with in order to elevate the process, and sometimes to step in to actually facilitate the utilization of a particular procedure when the complications are at a significant enough level so that they can't self-facilitate in that specific situation. So that's really important to be aware of. So let's go back now from the first 3 that I talked about all the way to the beginning, because another thing that you have been talking about at CEO Space is that even the slow learners, even the people who aren't clear about these procedures right at the very beginning, they gradually, with loving mentoring and healthy accountability, get there over the course of a number of days. And that's really delicious. But here's the secret to that, Russell. You and I know that virtually 100% of CEO Space members are authentically well-intentioned people who genuinely value integrity and collaboration and accountability. Out in the world, it's not 100%. So that leads to the very first of the procedures, which is procedures for personnel selection and onboarding. If an enterprise, nonprofit, for-profit, volunteer or paid, doesn't matter, if they don't have robust, clear procedures for selecting the right people, getting the right people on the bus, as is the phraseology that's used in the book Good to Great. Get the right people on the bus and get them in the right seat on the bus. If there isn't the right personnel selection process, then you're at risk of bringing the wrong people on or bringing the right people on and putting them in the wrong seat. What most enterprises do is they just simply look for people with certain competencies who are well-intended. Not good. Not good at all. They've got to have the right competencies and the right track record and the right dependability and the right intentions, but they also have to be highly self-responsible. If they don't have self-responsibility, if they aren't a match with that particular culture's values, then they're the wrong match, even if they're a good person. Let me say that phrase again. They're a wrong match, even if they're a good person. Go ahead.
So the process is designed really to ask the right questions, and they help the organization really just sort of define what that looks like, so that
yes.
It could be like somebody not ever who's seeing a zebra for the first time. It's just, you know, it's very different. You may not know what to call it, but you know it when you see it.
Yes. So there's a specific procedure that really does have more detail to it than in the context of our conversation today I can map out. And I know you know, but so our viewers know, I'm not trying to withhold. It's just not possible in our time limitations to go through all of that detail. But rest assured that there are very specific procedures for identifying the profiles of personnel that you want to select, not that go beyond the obvious levels that everyone addresses, which is accountability and qualifications and prior experience and things like that. That's the obvious stuff, but there are ways to identify the less obvious stuff too. The second is once we've selected and onboarded them in a good way, we've integrated them into our culture, we need to make sure that they're highly engaged. And what do I mean by high engagement? Gallup, the Gallup people, you know, the Gallup polls, the Gallup organization maintains something, a piece of research that they call the Gallup Engagement Index, Employee Engagement Index. And what they're doing is they're measuring how engaged the workforce is year over year over year. And what they find year over year over year is that 71% of the workforce is either disengaged or highly disengaged from their job. What does that do to productivity? What does that do to morale? What does that do to turnover? What does that do to sick days that aren't sick days? What does that do to culture destroying, right? So discretionary effort is very, very important. Discretionary effort is the effort that each person puts in that's above and beyond the bare minimum that they have to put in order to barely be retained so that they can continue to pay to collect a paycheck, or they can continue to be involved in as a volunteer in an organization that that they really do believe in, but they don't really want to put in high engagement, high effectiveness on behalf of that organization's mission that they may believe in. So there is a procedure for developing what I call vertical integrity, which is the key to high levels of discretionary effort, the effort over and above minimum necessary. And that vertical integrity procedure is a procedure that helps people align portions of their personal life mission with the true value that the role they fill provides to the organizations, the enterprises, the businesses' success, on behalf of helping that enterprise have high value in terms of what it brings to its customers or members or people it serves or society. And when you have that vertical integrity between an enterprise's true value, the true value that I provide, that the individual provides to their team and to the enterprise on behalf of that enterprise's mission, and where I'm expressing the true value that I bring to all of that through being able to express portions of my own life mission. When you have that kind of vertical alignment, vertical integrity, you have high discretionary effort. That's the formula for high discretionary effort, and that too is learnable. The next is about enhancing people's capacity to have authority in decision making. You have a lot of organizations where there are people who are given a lot of responsibility and very little authority. And the classic example of that, although it extends throughout all levels and all areas of an organization, but the classic example is customer care, where you have the customer care representative who's the interface with the customer, with the public, with the person who's unhappy or has a problem that they need solving or is disgruntled or could become a brand slaughterer, as David Corbin likes to use that term. It's a lovely term, brand slaughter, where they are at risk of being bad blood, creating bad blood out in the public about that enterprise, that for-profit or nonprofit. So you have this customer service representative who's the direct interface with these people, and they have all of the responsibility for resolving that person's problem, turning them from someone who's got a problem or who is unhappy into someone who is tremendously delighted with how they've been handled. But that customer service representative has no authority to do anything outside of the rigid rules that they have to follow that may have nothing to do with that particular person's problem. So there are ways to create something called guiding principles that govern decision-making, that when these personnel have really been trained in those guiding principles for decision-making, they can be given a level of authority for decision-making that matches the level of responsibility they've been given for dealing with whoever or whatever they're dealing with. So that's another thing. Another procedure is the procedure for developing guiding principles for decision-making that enable a business or a nonprofit to enhance the amount of authority it gives to its people without doing that in a self-destructive way that gives people more authority than they should have because they don't understand yet what the guiding principles for decision-making are. So that's now we're up to that we've just done number 6. Then there are 3 more that are left in the time that we've got. Let me just touch on them briefly. One is co-creation conversations. In other words, how to have conversations that elevate collaboration, that elevate the co-creation process, that help people be the magicians that they could be in creative problem solving and in negotiations. And what co-creation conversations is all about is the alternative to coercion, the alternative to competition, the alternative to compromise, which is horrible, because the best attainable outcome with compromise is all parties walk away from the negotiating table feeling equally ripped off. Thank you very much. That's not a culture building kind of situation where we walk away from our problem solving and our negotiation over and over again, feeling equally ripped off. Then we become an equally ripped off culture. That's not a high chip culture. That's not a high collaboration, happiness, integrity, productivity culture. So there are ways to create synergy, high level collaboration and co-creation instead. And there are guidelines and procedures for that. And then there are as well the procedures that are about performance reviews. And the traditional performance review is worthless. It's a punishment review. It's are you going to be retained or given a bonus or a raise, or are you going to be fired? Well, that's great for the company in the short term, but it's horrible for the culture. Performance reviews have to happen very regularly, anywhere between every 1 and 3 months. And they need to be about up-leveling engagement, not punishment or coercion. So the performance reviews are very simple when you have an integrated approach to culture creation, because all you're reviewing in those performance reviews is how is the person doing with their accountability capable commitments? How are they doing in implementing the emerging and evolving best practices that they've committed to? And how are they doing with handling, implementing the commitments they made as a result of the implementation, breakdown, repair commitments that they've made about how they're going to handle future similar situations a step better than they did the last time around? And lastly, what are their growth edges? What are they going to be committing in an accountability capable way to working on to expand themselves between now and the next performance review, after we've looked at how they've done with their last set of growth edge commitments? And when you have that kind of collaborative performance review that is growth oriented, it's collaboration oriented, it's discretionary effort up leveling, you've got magic, not punishment. You've got something that people don't have to be afraid of anymore. And the last procedure is the procedure when, heaven forbid, somebody turns out to not be the culture fit that you hoped they would be, because they aren't following through on commitments chronically. They're chronically not using best practices. They're chronically not elevating their performance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then there's collaborative disengagement. Listen to that seeming contradiction in terms. Collaborative disengagement. How do you disengage? When do you do a disengagement process? And how do you do it in a collaborative way so that it's a performance review that just simply makes emotional, psychological, and spiritual sense on top of the basic parameters of a disengagement conversation, which have to be in legal compliance so that you don't get in trouble with how you do the disengagement. But the legal compliance piece is just the baseline. It's not really where the rubber meets the road in terms of collaborative disengagement. So those are the 9. Those are the 9 right there.
And there's a lot in that. And so people can find out a little bit more about this. This is something you've been working on for a while, and you plan to, when is that webinar? You're going to do a webinar that really sort of explains this in some detail. When is that coming up?
Yes, I'm going to be doing a free webinar that goes into more detail than you and I covered today on Saturday, September 16th. And I'm also going to be recording it so that people who enroll, who sign up for that free webinar can watch the replay even if they don't attend it live, and or if they can watch the replay if they attend live and they want to hear portions of it again. But the way to register, and the only way you'll be able to get access to the replay, whether you watch live or don't, is through enrolling in the to attend the webinar, because I only have a limited number of seats available for the webinar. The way to get to that is drgruder.com/culture webinar. All lowercase, CULTUREWEBINAR, culture webinar, Dr. Gruder, DRGRUDER.com/culture webinar.
Yeah, and I found a link here. I put a link on Facebook that actually takes you to Eventbrite. So for our Facebook viewers, you'll find that in the comment section. I'll have those links in the replay, and I'll put up a replay here probably tomorrow. But we've got, this is great, the Gruder Culture webinar. Yeah.
I just put it in the chat box too.
I see that, and I'm going to drop that in the Facebook chat.
Super.
So it's marvelous. And so there's a lot here, David. It's always a pleasure. For those who are listening, go to drgruder.com. He has all sorts of other tools here that you can pick up and look at to learn a little bit more. If you're interested in a talk, you can go on this online scheduler and schedule a talk. As always, that's available here for those viewers here on the Nonprofit Culture of Success. If you'd like to talk with me, bit.ly/bookruss. And so we're out of time. But David, this has been absolutely marvelous. If any of this resonates with you folks, or you're just curious, by all means, make sure that you take some time to attend this webinar, because while it sounds like it's a lot, I've experienced some of the tools that David has put together, and they've been very helpful. And for me, I think that everything that you get should be easy to access, understand, and use. Otherwise, it's just not going to serve you. So next week, we have Hugh Ballou from Center Vision Leadership Foundation, who will be joining us.